Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com, and in this video is going to be the first of a handful of videos going over how to use Flask to build APIs. So this will be video number 1. Okay, this is going to be mainly focusing on just setting up your Flask server. Okay, from scratch. I do have a template, but we'll set it up from scratch. So I'm going to open up an empty folder. So I have an empty folder. In this case, it's called Flask. This is going to be the folder where I'm going to do this out of. So what I'm going to do is open up a new terminal. Okay, assuming you have Python installed, Python 3, a fairly recent version. Okay, and again, I have Python -- version. Okay, 3.85. Nowadays, Python has a built-in virtual environment module. So to create a virtual environment, you just do Python. And the reason you want a virtual environment is that you want to make sure that your dependencies for this project are kind of isolated. So that way, like, you're able to track what this project uses versus a different project. So you always kind of want everything to kind of have its own virtual environment. In the same way you want every node project to have its own package.json tracking its dependencies. Okay, so Python -m venv, and then I do venv again. The second venv is just the name of the environment. I always just do venv. So it's just that Python -m. I'm saying, hey, I want to use the venv module. That's what the -m flag means. It uses a module. And then this is the name of the folder that'll be outputted. So if I do that, and see, this creates this venv virtual environment folder. Now I need to activate my virtual environment. So what you have to do is you have to do source. That just means run some source code. And the source code you need to run is inside that venv folder, inside a folder called bin. Bin stands for binary. So always when you see bin, it just means binaries, raw code for the computer to read. Bin / and then there's a script in there called activate. And what this does is that it tells this particular terminal instance that whenever I'm using like the pip command going forward, that it's going to install the libraries that I use and track those libraries inside this folder. Okay, so technically this is going to be sort of like where my Python exists for this project, long as it's on. So when I run this, notice that you get this little like change in your prompt that says venv, or whatever the name of your environment is. And that means the environment is currently active. Now if I want to deactivate that and go back to normal, I would just type in deactivate. And then I can use the same command to return it back on. Okay, but you always want to make sure that you have that on in your terminal when you're working on a Python project, because that's, again, that allows you to install libraries in your environment, which is going to make it easier to like deploy and track things later. Okay, cool. So now that we've done that, we can install the things we need. Right now, all I run on install is Flask. Pip install Flask. Okay, and then what we need to do is just create a basic server script. So just create a new file called server.py. Server.py, and then we're going to import Flask. So import Flask from Flask. Okay. Or actually, it's like, I think it's like from Flask import Flask. There we go. I always get all the JavaScript, Python, Ruby, all this stuff. Always confuse all my head. So much syntax, so many different languages. So import Flask from Flask. Okay. And what we want to do is create a new application object. So we do Flask. Well, basically what you do is you do app, that's going to be the variable, equals Flask. Okay. And then we're going to say if just like what thunder init equals main. I forget the exact way I'm supposed to write this. I don't need that third equal sign because it's not JavaScript. Okay. And again, we'll fix this up in a second. App.run. Okay, what this is supposed to mean, I think I might have it wrong, set up wrong, but like basically what this is like there's a variable that's created that represents sort of like the context in which your files run. And generally, because basically your file can be used in one of two contexts. It's either the file you're running or it's a file imported by another file. Okay, so if this is the file you're running, so if I type in like python server.py, if I'm right, this init should be equaling main, but right now it's escaping me, so let me just take a look. Python if dunder init, or actually it's if name, right? If name equals main, that's what it is. So the variable's name. And so basically what's going to happen is that if the name equals main, that means that's the file you're running. If it equals anything else, it means you're importing it, not running it. So the only reason the file is being run is because some other file you are running is importing it. And this is important because sometimes you want the script, I might be importing it to grab a particular function out of it, but I don't want it to actually like run things in there unless it's the actual target file that I'm running. So that's what I'm saying here. I'm just saying, hey, if the name equals main, so it's the file that we're running, then I want you to run the server. Okay, and then here then we pass in all these arguments. Okay, such as like host, okay, which would be localhost. Okay, port, and then we have to actually like name these arguments. Host equals port equals, we'll say 4000, because the default's 5000, just to show you that like we're setting it up. Port, and I think that is good for now. App.run, and then let's just print a little message. Print. Okay, and then I'm going to interpolate by putting an F in front of the string. F listening. Well, I don't have any variables anyways, so I don't need to. Listening on port 4000. Okay. So now let's try that out. Let's see if we have the server running. Okay, so I'll just type in python server.py. Okay, python init, missing one positional requirement, import name, init missing one required positional argument. Let me just Google that one. Okay. Error because you did not pass a data variable to the Okay, so this is something more specific to Flask. So let's do that. There we go. Okay, why is your init method outside of the class? App.run, host port, we did all that. And then return class app equals Flask. Oh, that's right, we didn't pass the name into the Flask thing. Okay. So we have to pass this so that way it knows what the app is, the context that we are doing all this stuff in. Okay, cool. I think that should do it. Import Flask, import, yep. Did all that. Let's see here, that fixes up the problem. Name is not defined. Spelling it right, dunder name. Oh, I think I got one more. There we go. Let's try that again. There we go. Okay, so the server's running. Okay, so again, just to kind of go over that, this Flask function is what creates the application object, which we save here. And again, it needs this name variable because it needs to know like what's the context. Because like all your imports and reference the files are going to work kind of off that context, at least internal to the Flask, like what's going on underneath the hood. And then again, we're saying, hey, only run the server if we're actually running this file directly. And that's essentially what that's doing. So now I have a server, it's running. I can go to localhost 4000. And I get that because again, we haven't specified any routes. So now let's actually start specifying some routes. So I'll turn off the server using Control C. So by typing in Control C in the terminal, that shuts off the server, as we see here. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do app.get. Actually, not app.get. What you do is you do @app.get. So basically, in here we use decorators. Okay. So essentially, I'm saying app.get, and then here, okay, we would put the string as far as like what that is for. So like, run this route when it's a GET request for this URL. So we put slash. Okay, and then below that I'll define a function, which we'll call it our index route or our home route because it's our home page slash. Okay, and I'm not gonna take in any arguments right now. So def home, and then we're just gonna say return. And if you return a dictionary, it'll return it as JSON. So I'm going to return a dictionary and say hello world. Okay, so returning a dictionary with one key hello, which is the value is world. Okay, now I'll restart the server. So again, what this is doing is saying this, I'm registering a route. So I'm saying, okay, hey, if someone makes a GET request, which anytime you use the browser, that's a GET request, to this URL, which just means the root URL, because it's always like after that last slash. So if we're on URL localhost 4000, essentially that equals the slash. So essentially like the endpoint is anything here going forward. So now if I hit this now, see I get back hello world, because I'm saying, hey, whenever we put that in the browser, that's what I want you to get back. And that's essentially how the server works. We define these routes, and then when people make requests to the server, which is running on a particular port, which you can specify pretty much any port between 1 and 65,000. Don't use, the only ones to avoid would be like 6,000, 80, and 443. Those would be the main ones I'd avoid. Cool. So that's essentially the basics of how Flask works. So now you've set up the server. In the next videos, we'll explore more what you can do, like how to use like URL params, how to use URL queries, things like that. But otherwise, I will see you guys in the next video. Have a great day and enjoy.